everyone, Lu here. If you're new here, I made a video discussing cancelled or unreleased Vocaloids, but today I thought I'd do something a bit similar and discuss some Vocaloids that were discontinued. Now to start this video, let me explain what I mean by discontinued. I mean the company who developed the Vocaloid, this includes both Yamaha and the producer of the company itself, no longer sell physical or digital copies of said Vocaloid online or in specific stores anymore. Obviously you could purchase some of these voice banks on Amazon, eBay, Mercari, and Mandarake, but these are leftover copies nobody has bought for yet, or even scalpers trying to make a quick buck. With that explanation out of the way, let's get started. Rin and Len, Act 1. I know what you're going to say, but Lu, everyone uses Rin and Len V2. They're even still on Krypton Future Media's store. What are you talking about? But hear me out. Due to Miku's massive success and Krypton's desire to immediately capitalize on this success by supplying the now overwhelming demand for more cutesy anime-inspired voice banks, Rin and Len's voice banks were rushed by Krypton Future Media and released in December of the same year instead of being delayed for what I assume to be a few more months. Upon their first release, multiple people complained that both Rin and Len sounded extremely choppy to the point where they sounded more like a Vocaloid 1 era voice bank akin to Kaito or Meiko than a Vocaloid 2 era voice bank like Miku's at the time, which had smoother transition. I mean, by today's standards, V2 is not that smooth at all, but I hope you get where I'm coming from here. However, although this was starting to become the age of digital updates, like now, where if a game is buggy on release, we usually get a patch for it, Yamaha had strange legal restrictions regarding patches at the time, so Krypton basically had to release this patch under an entirely different quote-unquote voice bank, labeled as Rin and Len Act 2. They also received a very slight redesign in that their arm sleeves were now blue with audio levels instead of a green spectrum bar. Many would praise Act 2 for no longer being choppy, and people immediately purchased Act 2, while Act 1 was quietly discontinued and faded into the back. To this day, Rin and Len Act 1 is extremely difficult and expensive for newer producers to purchase. Act 2 can be purchased with relative ease on Krypton Future Media Store as well as Amazon, but Act 1? Yeah, I couldn't find a single copy on eBay, Mercari, Amazon, or Mandarake listing for this video. I even tried Yahoo Auction Japan, and again, I could not find anything. Why the hell would you even want Rin and Len Act 1 then? Well, I have heard from some people who use Rin Act 1 that in particular her voice is actually more cutesy than her Act 2 voice bank, and although choppy, sometimes that choppiness works to a song's advantage if it's a particularly heavy EDM style song like Giga. Hell, the YouTuber Hasuke actually shows that with real skill, Act 1 is a very impressive voice bank, especially with their cover of Corpse Dance by Kikuo. The only way though that I found you could use Rin and Len Act 1 is through means of piracy. I know the Vocaloid community looks down on piracy because let me tell y'all, this community has some real classist issues. But hey, it's managed to save a lot of voice banks you're going to see in this video from basically being lost forever. Overall, Rin and Len Act 1 is basically a rushed version of Act 2, but surprisingly still good for a lot of producers who prefer a more robotic sound to their Vocaloids. Uttatane Pico, one of the saddest discontinued Vocaloids in this video if you ask me. Pico was originally developed by Kyun Music and was basically supposed to be the male counterpart to SFA2 Miki, which they also own. Hence why you notice their designs were very similar. However, financial issues caused Kyun to sell both Pico and Miki's concepts to other companies. Miki would go to AHS Software, where she would later receive a V4 voice bank with several other flagship AHS software voice banks, and actually became a decently popular Vocaloid for a split second thanks to Insanity by Circus P. Pico, on the other hand, would go to Sony Music, where he had a disastrously quiet release, almost as bad, if not worse, than Fukase. Even weirder was that when Pico's demo released to the public and people shared songs with Pico's public demo, Sony would take down all songs featuring this demo voice bank. It was really weird, but then again, we all know Sony has really weird standings on pretty much any policy under the sun. Although Pico flopped badly, people eventually garnered a cult following for Pico for reasons I don't fully know. other than the fact that Pico has an extremely wide range for a male voice bank and is a very cute design. In later years, Pico would finally have some hits under his belt more so than his sister Miki, which include Chelovek by Ghost, Ghost remix of Creative by Creep P, My Own by Circus P, and a cover of Abnormality Dancing Girl by Guchiri, which this cover was done by Kakyuke. However, despite this following, Pico was sadly discontinued by Sony. The exact reason has never been stated by Sony Music as to why Pico was discontinued. Some theorize low sales, others piracy issues, and more, but if you ask me, I think it was honestly just very low sales, and Sony not really giving a shit about preserving their older archives in favor of shit that made bank. Trust me, have y'all seen how Sony treats most PS1 and PS2 games? Not to mention, like, fan art and a handful of people buying an extremely obscure Vocaloid doesn't give a major company like Sony enough motivation to keep making physical copies and server space for digital CD keys. Now, obviously you can find Pico on sites like Mandarake, Amazon, and eBay from time to time, but don't exactly expect Pico to be affordable. I can't find any current listings on literally any site I've mentioned in this video, but I do remember from last year seeing a listing for around $600 for a brand new in-box Pico. Sadly, this is another instance where you'll have to pirate Pico if you want to use his voice bank. In any case, I see it as a particularly good thing because without that, then his voice would quite literally be lost forever, and I actually quite like Pico's voice. I don't exactly like Pico in the higher range all the time in a song, but if you balance his deep and higher ranges very well, he can be an extremely useful voice bank who can sound very powerful and emotional with the right tuning. Overall, Pico is a really great voice bank that was sadly fucked over by Sony. Before we get to the finale of this, here's some honorable mentions. These are original versions of Vocaloids that were later given a V3 or V4 voice bank that sound pretty much identical and is heavily improved, so most don't really see a need for these voice banks because they sound exactly the same. Dana V3. Although Dana is a fantastic V4 voice bank, she was originally a V3 voice bank that was exclusive and distributed through a Rana-centric magazine series where you had to purchase all 30 issues. I mean, granted, the magazine was nice enough to give you a music program, MMD model, and allegedly very helpful guides on how to be a Vocaloid producer, but like 30 magazines? Seems a bit ridiculous to me. Now, I don't know how well Rana did, but I'm guessing her developers probably realized how ridiculous this method of distribution was and released her under a V4 voice bank. A few years later, where she's still a very well-liked voice bank in the community. I personally think Rana has an adorable voice and I love how cutesy and powerful she is, though I do think her design is a little messy, despite me being literally obsessed with rainbows. I don't really notice a difference between her V3 and V4. Some say V4 Rana sounds a little deeper, but I think she just sounds clearer. Vocaloid 2 engine. I know it's not a voice bank, but I just wanted to talk about it. I, for the life of me, could not find the Vocaloid 2 engine, which is weird because there's a lot of Vocaloid 2 voice banks still for sale, like Miku, Luca, Rin, Len, Tonio, Prima, Big Al, and Sweet Anne. I honestly looked pretty much everywhere and I just couldn't find it, so I'm gonna assume that Yamaha discontinued Vocaloid 2, which makes sense. Though, as I was working on this, I did find a statement from Yamaha from 2016 saying that Vocaloid 2 was no longer being distributed. According to PowerFX's product page for their V2 Vocaloids, Vocaloid 2 can't or has extreme difficulty running on Windows operating systems of 8 or newer, and I can't seem to see why a company would want to keep selling a software and engine that isn't capable of running on most computers. Can y'all imagine the complaints from customers who are dumb and didn't read the requirements? I don't think it's a shame because Vocaloid 2 voice banks run just fine on V3 and V4, but obviously there could be people who just like the layout of Vocaloid 2 the most. Azuki and Matcha. Although these two received a fantastic Vocaloid 4 voice banks, with Azuki being one of my favorite voice banks to work with, they were originally for a PS Vita game called Uttatane 575. The game had an extremely basic, light version of Vocaloid 2's engine. Some people managed to jimmy rig some stuff around and managed to brute force their voice banks into the actual Vocaloid 2 engine, but obviously you would need the files for their voice banks from the game, and since the PS Vita has long since died and this game clearly didn't do so well, safe to say their V2 Lite voice banks are discontinued. Though since the game didn't do so well and was largely disliked by non-Vocaloid fans, they're found on eBay for relatively cheap prices, but you will probably need a Japanese PS Vita to play the game and legally use their voice banks. At least I think so. I don't know the PS Vita's issues regarding loading up international games, so Google is your friend, y'all. And now to the grand finale of this video. Miriam, Leon, and Lola. I looked pretty much everywhere on Zero G and Yamaha's websites for these three, but I legit could not find them anywhere legally. I looked on Amazon, eBay, Yahoo Auction Japan, Mercari, Mandarake, but damn, I couldn't find a single listing for them. I do remember a while ago though that Zero G said they would retire their V1 era Vocaloids solely because newer software struggles to run this software without frequent crashings. And this much is true. I've seen quite a few owners of Miriam and Leon basically have to run a Windows XP or Windows 98 emulator to get V1 working without shitting itself. It's just a shame being Leon and Lola were the first Vocaloids ever made. Obviously, we have a sort of reincarnation of them being Amy and Chris, and while Amy does sound like a good spiritual successor to Lola, it's just the same can't be said about Leon because I actually do really like Leon's voice. It also especially sucks for me as I absolutely love Miriam's voice. I know some people say she sounds like Oliver, but damn it, I just think Miriam has a really pretty voice and design. It's a shame that Zero G isn't doing voice banks anymore because damn, a Miriam Vocaloid 5 voice bank would be so good. Except I don't think her voice provider, a singer also named Miriam, wasn't all that enthusiastic about her voice bank the way most modern Vocaloid voice providers are today. I'd say Leon and Lola deserve a V5 too, but like, we literally don't know anything about their voice providers to a point where we don't even know if they're still alive to do a voice update. So that's just up in the air if you ask me. The good thing is that Kaito and Meiko are still easy-ish to purchase on places like Amazon, eBay, and Yahoo Auction Japan, but like I said, using V1 voice banks is a tricky thing and basically playing software Russian roulette. Obviously, you can get Miriam, Leon, and Lola through non-legal means, and that's good because these three voice banks are extremely important to the history of Vocaloid and deserve to be archived to see just how far the engine has come since Vocaloid 1. I mean, we all talk shit about V5 constantly crashing and running like a potato if you have too many tracks open, but jeebus, have y'all heard Leon and Kaito without any tuning in Vocaloid 1? Because y'all, we have improved so damn much. Ending it with Vocaloid 1 voice banks sounds like a good way to end this video though, so do you have any voice banks in this video that you love? Are there any that I should have mentioned? Have you even heard of any of these voice banks before? As always, let me know down below. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. If any of you would like to help support my channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description, along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who'd like to help with video ideas, or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!